The NFL Week 2 salary exploitation for DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. Breaking down some salary, things that popped out at me this week. Looking really at a Week 2 pricing that jacked up on really all three sites. And this is an interesting week, after a kind of a debacle of Week 1 where it was just a lot of gross playing football for, majority of the weekend. We got some big games here. We got Patriots heading into New Orleans. We have Atlanta taking on Green Bay. Oakland gets the Jets. There's a lot of favorable spots. There's a lot of potential here this week. And a lot of guys got priced up. You kind of saw with some of the backups here that popped up, in pricing based on matchups. So FanDuel, Yahoo, they took a jump at most of these guys. You're not getting a lot of big discounts on some of these guys, but for the most part, there's still a couple of guys that did miss the pricing bump. So once again, to kind of recap, this is a show that we're just kind of looking at plays in their pricing. We're not, early on in the week, we still have a lot to evaluate moving forward. So they're not must plays. They're not plays that I'm saying go and plug into your lines. They're just kind of pricing that we're just talking about here across the sites and plays that are better on DraftKings or better on FanDuel than the other two. So let's jump into it. Let's look at quarterbacks. Two that popped out for me this week: Jameis Winston taking on Chicago. 6,300 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel, 31 on Yahoo. The below 8K mark on FanDuel, the below 6,500 mark on DraftKings. DraftKings this week is interesting because I usually like paying down at quarterback there. This week, lots of tough spots. Alex Smith is still priced down. Carson Wentz, Sean Kaiser are in tough spots. Carson Palmer looked god-awful in Week 1. So there's some guys that are cheap still, but there's no 4,800, there's no 5K guy that I'm really particularly interested in. Winston's a nice pivot down here at 6,300. This is a guy, obviously, they had the Week 1 bye. He gets Chicago at home. Bears are pretty much an average pass defense, 17th in DVOA against last year. Get a pretty good upgrade with Deshaun Jackson heading into Tampa Bay. Mike Evans, Cameron Brate, going to use Charles Sims out of the backfield. Should see some Jaquiz Rodgers runs every once in a while, but I expect actually Winston to be kind of moving this offense. So Tampa Bay should be overlooked given the fact that there are a lot of other teams within this slate that are going to be much higher owned. So I definitely don't mind looking at Winston as kind of a contrarian, cheaper option. So he caught my eye really on all three sites. I think he's fairly priced and maybe even a little bit underpriced in consideration to what he can put up this week. So Alex Smith, he's the other one coming off an absolute monster game. His touchdown production, I think, is going to vary just based on just overall playmaking ability of guys like Hunt and guys like Hill. We did see him slinging the ball around more than usual. That was definitely unusual for a Chiefs offense, but this is one where I think, getting Philly at home, Arrowhead's a tough place to play. They lost Darby last week. 5,700 on DK, 72 on FanDuel, 28 on Yahoo. Not bad prices for a guy who, can go around and toss 200 plus yards and 2 touchdowns. And even, there is some rushing upside. He's definitely a mobile quarterback as well who can pick up 2 to 3 extra points just on the ground if needed. So he's an interesting play this week at home against Philly. He's not going to jump off the page at anyone. I know last week he kind of lit things on fire playing New England, but Smith is a decent option at the price tag. I don't mind going that way. To talk strategy this week, we're going to get to running backs here, and that's going to kind of dictate where I go with the passing games and where I'm paying up at. So last week I mentioned there's no quarterback over 9K. This week we have 2. We have 7 over 8,000. Yahoo has a lot of guys closely packed together, and we'll get to that in a minute, where there's not a lot of separation between a lot of guys, so the tiers become very small. And the same thing happened on FanDuel. And if you've played baseball over the year on FanDuel and you're playing there on DFS as well, you kind of saw after the break them jack up prices on a lot of guys to kind of really thin out the playing field. There's not a lot of $1,000 differences between players in some of these positions where you're actually looking, I'm going to get a great bargain. Everything's kind of closely packed together, whether you like it or not this week. Curious to see if that keeps going for the rest of the year. Once again, it doesn't look like matchups are being really plugged into the algorithm on FanDuel. Yahoo a little bit, DraftKings obviously more severely. So there still is that difference. But moving on to running backs, we had the David Johnson injury. We can pour one out for him. Obviously, it's going to be a growth situation there in Arizona. I just flat out think they might be a bad offense to target moving forward. Kerwin Williams is an interesting option this week. If we can get some clarification, I talked about him on the targets and touches report. He should lead in touches. I still think Andre Ellington's a PPR back at best, and I don't have any interest in Ellington. I think Williams is a guy I will take a look at if we can get some clarification. But things that I've seen coming out kind of really of late, it's going to be maybe a little bit of a committee. They just signed Chris Johnson. If he ends up playing this week, that's still up in the air. Could be next week. If next week, it'll be a situation that I don't even touch. But because they match up against Indy, I think we have to take a look at it and just kind of gauge some interest. But here's my issue really with Kerwin Williams on FanDuel and Yahoo. Kerwin Williams, he's $400 cheaper than Ty Montgomery on FanDuel. He is $1 more expensive on Yahoo than Ty Montgomery. DraftKings is $1,000 difference. We also have Buck Allen, who I trust more for touches and also gets a matchup against the Browns at home. So a good spot for him there. That's kind of where Williams kind of sits in here. He's going to be a guy that you don't need to go to. It's not an immediate plug and play for week 2 because Johnson's hurt and it's against Indy. We have Buck Allen. We have Ty Montgomery. You want to spend up a little more and get maybe a Marshawn Lynch, you can do so. So, there's that factor with Kerwin Williams this week where you don't have to play him, and he may end up being contrarian just because of the sense that it's an unclear situation and it's an offense that really might actually lean on the pass a little bit more and kind of pick up some guys in the short passing game like a Fitzgerald, John Brown, J.J. Nelson, and kind of go that route too to move the ball. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes this week. I think it's a good GPP look, but in terms of cash game, guys, I mean, you either easily go Montgomery, you easily go Buck Allen in those situations. So do note that. And we'll kind of move into Ty Montgomery here. He's going to be one of the higher ownership guys of week 2. Atlanta's a team that ranked 25th in DVOA against pass catching backs last year. We saw Cohen and Howard combined for 11 catches. Montgomery, 19 rushing attempts against a really good Seattle run defense. He did punch in a touchdown. He also had 54 rushing yards, but he caught 4 balls for 39 yards. This guy's easily going to be a 15 to 20 touch guy in this offense that's going to be a high-powered and going up against an Atlanta team that was absolutely shredded by pass-catching backs like a Montgomery. So, he's a guy, he's a really tough fade on GPPs just because of, one, the matchup and what he can produce, but also the fact that we're getting him at still a ridiculous bargain on all 3 sites. So lots of Ty Montgomery going to be in my core this week. I don't really care about ownership there. I'll make some moves elsewhere to pivot off of and get some kind of cheaper guys or get some guys that are going to be lower owned. But Montgomery is easily one of the best values on the board. Talking about LaShawn McCoy, ripped off against the Jets defense this last week. Now Oakland gets them at home. Jets are huge favorites. We saw the Raiders become more of a passing offense inside the red zone. They have one of the best lines in the league. I expect Lynch to kind of start to get a little bit more red zone touches in this offense. It needs to happen. I know they tried to force feed Amari Cooper in the red zone, saw him drop a couple of passes in a row. But Lynch looked like his old self. I mean, taking multiple defenders to bring him down. He had 19 touches in week 1. This is a guy they're going to monitor his snaps, but I don't think they're going to monitor his touches all that much. So I think when he's on the field, he's going to be getting the ball. 19 touches is decent as his price tag against this Jets team that was just shredded against by the Bills on the ground. Lynch only $6K on DraftKings, $7,200 on FanDuel, $20 on Yahoo. That's another price tag, $20. I mean, you could fire up Lynch and Montgomery and go spend some cash elsewhere. So one of my favorite backs this week against the Jets. He'll be another popular one too. So a few more notes about RB pricing this week. Ezekiel Elliott heading into Denver. Sneaky good spot for him. 7,800 on DraftKings. FanDuel, Yahoo, he's priced up quite a bit. I don't really like him there. I do like him on DraftKings at that 78, though. That's not a bad price tag. Denver still showed, the struggles to stop the run last night against Melvin Gordon in that offense, and this is a better line for the Cowboys than it is for San Diego. So Elliott's in play for me. I definitely like him at 7,800. Should come in fairly low owned as well. I mentioned Terrence West, Buck Allen. James White, interesting PPR back this week at 4K. I'll pass on FanDuel and Yahoo, where the half-point PPR really isn't all that appealing for guys like White. So as a cheap option in a game that's, implied basically 30 total there for New England on the road against New Orleans defense just got absolutely shredded by Sam Bradford. White's an interesting play. He played the most snaps out of all the running backs there, and could get around 6 to 7 targets, as a ceiling there, and crack maybe a 4 to 5, 51 line, and you're kind of looking pretty good at a 4K. So he's interesting to get exposure to that game. Wide receivers this week, I'm not all that thrilled with paying down. There are a couple of guys that did catch my eye as far as just cheap dart throws. We'll start here with Jordan Matthews. Obviously, we look at that Bills game. We're not expecting heavy passing attempts in that volume. You look at Jordan Matthews, he led the Bills in receiving yards. It was only 61 yards. It was 2 catches. He only saw 3 targets. I'm a little bit more intrigued with Matthews this week. I think Carolina jumps out to a little bit of a lead. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are going to be on Buffalo, and I don't expect them to. This is more of just kind of a dart throw in GPPs because Matthews, I expect a tick up in targets, throughout the year. I could see him in the 4, 5, 6 range this week. Possibility for more, but obviously Charles Clay and LaShawn McCoy were the go-to options for Tyrod in week 1. These guys are plug-and plays. I mean, like I said, Keenan Allen, Jordan Matthews, Allen Hurns, Emmanuel Sanders. These are the 4 that I'm looking at here, and Matthews is just more of an interesting dart throw at this point. Allen Hurns is very similar. 3,900 on DK, 56 on FanDuel, 13 on Yahoo. We saw what the Jacksonville should be. That's run first team. You give the ball to Fournette. You play good defense. That's it. Allen Robinson injury obviously hurts this Jacksonville team. He's one of the more talented wide receivers. Blake Bortles, obviously not a friendly situation, but Allen Hurns, Marquise Lee, targets are going to start to pump in their way a little bit more. Tennessee's pass defense still looked pretty pedestrian in their opener, so I definitely don't mind taking a look at them. Once again, I'm not going overboard with any of these names, but I think they're on the decent side. The 2 now I think are much more valuable plays and can see getting more exposure to. One's Keenan Allen, decent night against Denver. Clearly, he's still going to be a guy Philip Rivers looks at quite a bit. Miami, 16th in DVOA against the pass last season. Allen's going to be a guy who usually leads the Chargers in targets. I like him on DraftKings where he can rack up the PPR ability. 5,800 there is a really nice price tag for him. 71 on FanDuel isn't that bad. 25 on Yahoo isn't bad either. I definitely like his potential. FanDuel, Yahoo, I think you need to touch down a little bit more. DraftKings, you don't, not so much. You can get one of those 8 for 95, 8 for 102 type lines and miss on the touchdown. Still definitely hit value for Keenan Allen and what you want out of him. Other guy I'm taking a look at, Emmanuel Sanders. Didn't do much, obviously, in the Monday night game. Obviously, could have had a touchdown. I think they didn't challenge it. He looked into me. Dallas secondary, pretty mediocre. I know they obviously came off a night where they shut down the Giants, but Giants just looked bad. Sanders coming off an 80-catch year. Dallas 18th in DVOA against wide receiver 2s. 6,400 on FanDuel, 20 on Yahoo, 52 on DK. Those are nice prices for Sanders who has some upside. Simeon actually looked like a comparable quarterback to get some of these guys some upside in week 1 against a decent Chargers secondary. So I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw. I think that offense might actually be a little bit better than I was anticipating coming into the year. So I don't mind that route. Tight ends, let's talk Rob Gronkowski here. And one thing I like to do with Gronkowski is I move him into the wide receiver category and I figure out where he matches up and what price tier he comes in. He's the 9th most expensive wide receiver on DraftKings, 4th most on FanDuel, 9th on Yahoo. And I say that because he's expensive. He's up there. You want that high-end production out of tight ends because there are cheap options that a lot of people go with, which makes sense as a strategy. But Gronkowski does have a little bit of a different fit for me this week. I don't think $26 on Yahoo is all that bad. 6,900 on DK, not a bad price tag either. 81 on FanDuel is a little bit steep, but Gronkowski is a guy who could possibly eat this week and have a multi-touchdown game and close in 100 yards. He has that upside. There is that potential this week. So I like him on all 3 sites. I like him better on DraftKings and Yahoo. I think he has a little bit more value potential there. New Orleans 22nd DVOA against tight ends. And like I said, New England implied team total of 30. I mean, I don't think it gets any better here for this passing game. It's just a matter of fact who gets the points because it can be so spread out. And that's obviously the risk that you take with taking a Gronk who does suck up so much of your salary at these prices. But if you do take a mediocre line on FanDuel where there is no PPR scoring, 8,100 is a tough one to climb back if he doesn't do much. So a little bit less of a sting on DraftKings and Yahoo. Another cheap tight end. We don't have Zach Ertz this week. He actually gets a tougher matchup and took a $2,000 price bump on DraftKings, but he deserves it with the way he's been playing over his last 8 weeks. A cheap tight end that did stand out, Martellus Bennett against Atlanta. Falcons allowed the 6th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends last year. Obviously, they didn't face a comparable tight end in week 1. Packers offense, they're another one who's going to be a week-to-week production. We saw Cobb and Jordy do it last week against Seattle. Bennett caught 3 of his 6 targets for 43 yards. I think 6 targets is going to be about what you get out of Bennett on a week-to-week basis. I think that's a pretty stable number. He's one of the sub-4K guys on DraftKings I don't mind. 5,800 on FanDuel, it's not as great, but I don't mind it. But like I said, there's a lot of pricing up that went on FanDuel. 5,800 is now sort of cheap. And that's kind of where my reference from baseball was. If you played baseball, you get some of those cheap catchers that you're like, oh, I was paying 2,400 for this guy. All of a sudden he's 32. That's kind of happening in football now. Yahoo, $18, not bad for Bennett. And in another expected high scoring game, I think he's an intriguing option. Let's talk defenses here. Kansas City and Baltimore. These are kind of the guys that I didn't see really priced up all that much. Kansas City gets Philly at home. Obviously, the loss of Eric Berry is troubling for this defense. That is a loss for them. Opposing teams averaged 16 points per game at Arrowhead last year. Special teams is also a threat for Kansas City with Tyreek Hill on the return team. KC was swarming in week 1. I mean, they look good. I expect them to be good at home. Second-year Carson Wentz, obviously, who – it wasn't bad in week 1, but, made a couple of mistakes. The running game that looked very below average. I think this is a decent spot for the Chiefs, who always have that sneaky upside with the special teams. And 2,900 on DK, I mean, that's a great bargain. 45 on FanDuel, that's not bad. 19 on Yahoo, it's not bad either, but it's not that great. So I do like those price tags on FanDuel and DraftKings, especially with all those defenses that are priced up. On the Baltimore side, obviously one of the better showings of week 1. It was a big defensive week because mainly the offenses were absolute crap. But this is a Browns team that allowed 7 sacks. Deshaun Kaiser is still going to be a rookie who makes a lot of mistakes, even though I think there was some promise in him. Baltimore had 5 takeaways in week 1. They were top 10 in takeaways last year. A home team against Cleveland. I'm definitely firing away at this Baltimore defense. Here's where we kind of get the discount on them. FanDuel, 4,700, definitely not a bad price tag for Baltimore. 21 on Yahoo, 37 on DK. They're probably appropriately priced on DraftKings, so you have to pay to get that. So do note that. But overall, that's going to wrap things up for the salary exploitation for week 2. You can check out my article over on dailyfantasycafe.com and keep tabs on the rest of our content that will be rolling out through the week. So see you guys tomorrow.